So this is a really easy tutorial of how to blend a couple images together and use some really fun brushes on masks to create these really surrealist kind of portraits. It's like a double exposure, but you're going to use the background with some really fun shapes. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a portrait, we're going to combine it with a scenic picture, and we're going to layer those two things together, play with some layer modes, play with some masking to create this really fun portrait. Now to start with, I have made a brush out of this shape. So if you've never made brushes before, go ahead and check out that tutorial on how to make a brush. But we're going to just use what we have done so far to kind of make this a little bit shorter. So I've started with these two images, and to begin with, you could layer these two together, or a nice way to start this off is simply to make a brand new image and brand new document. So I'm going to go into the print mode, and I know I want a letter size. That's what's going to go into the printer. I could also do an 8x10. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create. Now the nice thing is this gives me that blank white background, which is going to be really helpful later on. I'm then going to go to my image. I'm going to select all. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to jump over here, and I'm going to paste that in. I'm going to do a transform, Command T, and I'm just going to stretch this out to the size that I want. I can always crop the entire document later if I need to do that, but this gives me just an idea of how big it's going to fit in print. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. All right, the next thing is let's go over here to our landscape. Let's select all, Command A, copy that, Command C, and jump over here and paste that in. Now it is not the same ratio, the same scale, so I'm going to again Command T, stretch this out, and I'm going to have to decide which part of this landscape do I like the best. So I'm going to go over here for a bunch of texture. I can always move this around later, so don't worry that it's in the perfect place right now. We just want to have it full size. And I'm going to go ahead and hit return. Now I have all of my images stacked that I'm going to use, and I'm going to go ahead and just close the eye in this top one just to know I'm working with my portrait to begin with. Now I'm going to do a really quick selection on here and select my portrait. You can also do the object select. It is up to you. It depends on how busy your background is. So there we go. I'm going to select that. I'm not super happy with how this adjusts on my hairline, so I'm going to go up here to my select and mask, and I'm going to go clean that up. So I have my edge brush tool, and I'm going to sweep along this edge, and it gets my hairline looking a lot more natural. There we go. Now I could do the same thing along the edge of my face if I want to do that, but you got to be careful. It's going to pick up some of those blinds. Now I'm going to change a lot of the things I do with my background, so I'm okay if that edge is a little rough. If you are not, simply switch that back to the minus and you can take that away. Okay. You can also go to the full selection and pull out more if you need to. I'm just going to kind of go through here and make some adjustments. There we go. And I want my face, my eye back in there. That looks great. I'm also going to feather just a little bit to soften that edge and hit OK. I've now made my selection. I've refined my selection. So I can go down here to my mask button and turn this layer into a mask. And now I have the background and I have my face, and it's a completely clear, empty background. Now whatever color you have on this background is what's going to show through. As you can see, it's been blocked out. I'm going to leave this here and just let the white be the part that creates the absence and the negative space in my image. Now I'm going to open up this top landscape image. And we're going to change the mode on this. We're in normal mode. We are going to change the blending mode so that these layers can start to blend together. Now some modes will just leave the entire image, but the reason why we have the background as white is because there's a lot of color layer modes that are going to adjust and part of the image will disappear. And as I do that, I really like what's happening with screen. I like what's happening with overlay. It gives me a really rich color. And I like what's happening with soft light. It lets my portrait seep through a lot more. So go ahead and scroll through it. Depending on your image, different ones are going to work out better than others. I'm going to stick with overlay for right now. And here's the great thing. I can now decide to move this around. Now that I've chose my blending mode, I can go back to the move tool, and I'm on my landscape layer. I can move this layer around and see what I really like with this blending mode and which area is going to be the strongest for me. So maybe I like these branches through here giving some more texture. Maybe I like the highlight across my eye. Actually don't. I think it makes my eye disappear. So I'm going to think about what happens with the color, what happens with the light, what happens with the texture. Kind of like this. It almost looks like veins coming through the face. But I gotta be careful. I'm losing part of this on the top, so I can either transform this layer again and stretch it out, or I could just simply raise it up a little bit. And I'm gonna go ahead and do that. All right. So I now have these two things blended together. I'm not really happy with how much of my face disappears. I think my nose looks a little strange. So I'm going to turn this layer into a mask as well so that I can clean up some of these areas and bring more of my features out. So I go down here, I add this, turn this into a layer mask, and I'm going to go back to my brush tool, and I'm going to go ahead with this nice soft brush. I'm going to make my opacity a little bit lower so I have a little bit more control with that. Let's increase the size, and I can go through and I can paint out. Nothing's happening. What's wrong? Oh, that's right. My mask is white. I'm painting with white. Let's switch to black. And as I paint over this, I can make more of the photo layer show through. I can decide if I want it really soft and go down to 20% and gently paint some things out and slowly build that up. That is up to you. But I can go through and have this nice blend between what is landscape and what is portrait. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that there. I think this white space becomes really inactive. It's really empty, and I'm like looking into the space and there's nothing there. So I'm going to do a couple more things with that so that we have something to look at. And let's just check out the finished one so you can see where we're headed. In the finished version, I use a different blending mode, just so you know, that's why it looks a little different. And I loved the absence here that created with that space so that it's the white background, there's white inside my hair, a little bit of leaves on my nose, and I decided to do a leaf shape in this background space to kind of activate that empty area. So what I did with that, let's go back to our one in progress. I'm going to go in here into this layer mask because that is what is blocking out this whole white space. And I'm going to put some texture and stuff inside this area. So I'm on my brush tool, and let's go look at the brushes that we've made. Ahead of time, I've made some other brushes. So I have snowflakes and all kinds of things in here. I also made a leaf. So I found a maple leaf and I made that into a brush. And so remember over here, we can change the properties of our brush and brush settings. So I can rotate this brush in whatever direction I need that to be. So I'm going to have some sort of movement with it, like there's like fall leaves and they're going to be falling. And I can decide to shrink this down or make this larger. That's kind of up to me. I'm going to leave this window open so that I can make some rotations as I need to. I'm going to make sure I'm on this layer mask where my portrait is. And I'm going to make sure that I am painting with white because this area, this background area, is black in the mask. Now I'm only at 25%, so I can decide how strong to make this brush. And as I click, it's going to make just a few leaves falling through. And you can see those leaves showing up inside here. So I can make some larger ones and make those really soft and faint. I could make some things really bold as well. And maybe I want to rotate this another direction. And that's going to be a really strong one. So kind of decide for yourself what is going to create some really nice movement in this space. So as you activate it, where do you need some emphasis? So where do you need to make some things stronger? Where do you need to make some things softer? So I can make a really strong one here. I could take this back to something softer and really play around with both scale and opacity so that I can decide what I want. Sometimes some really nice tiny ones are going to be exactly what you need. So let's shrink down the size. And sometimes they're so soft, like nothing is happening. So just be careful with some of those things of what's going on. You can play around until you get exactly what you like on this. Sometimes I like to also go through and overlap my edges so that this is not simply just the head in there. It can kind of flow into and turn into some of these shapes as well. Keep in mind that you do have these properties. Sometimes I like to leave it open just so I can rotate as I need to. Be careful of doing some strange things. I don't think I need a leaf coming out of my nose, but I might want to play with just scale and opacity again to really create an active composition. I think a little flower, a leaf crown might be kind of nice in there too. Okay, so you can go through and mix those things up. I'm getting a little weird thing happening on top because I know my image up here does not stretch all the way up to the top. So again, if I need to, I can go back into this image. I can always make adjustments and shift that up. And so now the landscape covers every area that I'm painting into. And now I'm looking into these leaves that are falling, and I'm creating a lot more of an interesting composition. Consider what color you want in your background. Sometimes it might be nice to have a little bit of the color that's in the image. So I can click on here and go sample out one of these colors, but be careful how strong that is. I don't want the background to overpower my image. So maybe I kind of get that color, but then I soften it to something that's still in the same family, but not quite that bold. I can go back in, paint bucket that layer, and you're going to see some other things showing through. Sometimes you're going to like that, sometimes you're not going to like that. It kind of changed everything. So I kind of like the white because it helps keep this blending mode as an absent space. So I would say start with that, see what you have, go play around, and make this really interesting composition